In my last video, I shared the origin of the myth that Christians are just as likely to divorce as non-Christians, which was started by the Barna research organization in 2004 by defining Christians based on their personal confession rather than their practice.
I don't go to church, sir.
Which ends up grouping nominal Christians and the devout together, giving an inaccurate picture.
You are not a Christian.
In today's video, I'm going to share better studies that have a larger sample size and account for church attendance. When we look at those studies, we see that being a practicing Christian leads to lower divorce rates. The first study I'm going to highlight is from Baylor University in 2014. Their headline reads, "Evangelicals have higher than average divorce rates." You read that right. Now, you might think that's an odd study to quote from, as it seems to be even worse than the Barna study.
So that means it is opposite day.
Well, it's a clickbaity title, but when you look at their actual breakdown, it reveals a different picture. Here are the results that match their headline. White conservative Protestants and black Protestants are more likely than the average American to be divorced, with 17.2% and 15.7% of their populations being currently divorced, respectively. Indeed, evangelical Protestants are more likely to be divorced than Americans who claim no religion. But what they didn't highlight in their headline, but mention in their study, was when you stop just looking at self-profession and take into consideration church attendance, it does make a difference. So they also say as part of their conclusion, overall, couples who have higher levels of religious service attendance, especially if the couple attends together, have lower rates of divorce. So that means, just like the Barna study, when they take people based on their self-profession, they get data which is close to the national average. But when they filter it by religious service attendance, the divorce rate goes down. That is because they start filtering out nominal Christians and start isolating those who take their faith more seriously. Now, the data that Baylor University used is from the General Social Survey, which is publicly available data that was conducted at regular intervals from 1972 to 2018. Over all of the national samples that were taken through the history of the project, nearly 60,000 American adults have been surveyed. So we're dealing with a much larger sample size than Barna was working with, which was only 3,600 to 3,700 adults. Now, there was another group who used the same General Social Survey data, but they took it a step further in refining the data to separate those who are devout Christians from those who are not. To do that, they used the metric of attendance of 2 or more religious services per month. This specific metric helps to exclude nominal Christians, who may attend on Christmas or Easter, but otherwise would not attend.
We go to church. On Christmas, Carla goes every Sunday.
The group that did their survey was the Institute for Family Studies, and in March 2020, they published their findings with the title, "Regular Church Attenders Marry More and Divorce Less Than Their Less Devout Peers." Now, their study found that using a large sample size of almost 60,000 people aged 25 to 54 from 1972 to 2018, there was a reduction in divorce for devout Christians. Now, their study is separated by white and black races. So for white Christians, there was a 25% reduction in divorces in the 2010s compared to the non-devout public. Whereas for black devout Christians, there's only a minimal difference between their rates and the public. But when you combine black and white together into a composite, you still have a 15% reduction in divorce compared to the non-devout. And so they conclude, contrary to what is sometimes claimed, Christians who go to church on a regular basis are more likely to marry and less likely to divorce than the general population. Now, this latest study from Harvard University is a peer-reviewed published study with more than 66,000 participants, all who were female nurses, were married at the time of the study when it started in 1996, and were mid to late life in age, which is when most divorces take place. They took info on their religious practices, including the specifics about how often they attended religious services, and then followed them for 14 years. At the conclusion of the study, there were 685 divorces and 239 marital separations, for a total of 924 out of this 66,000 number. So this study analyzes the differences between those who remain married and those who are divorced or separated during that 14-year period. The conclusion of their paper states, in conclusion, in this prospective cohort study of US female nurses over a 14-year period of follow-up from mid to late life, we found that frequent religious services attendance have the risk of divorce among married women. Now, I just want to be fair and say that there is one problem with the Harvard study that plays in our favor stats-wise, but we need to be honest with, and that is that 98% of the women in their study were Caucasian. We know from the Institute for Family Studies data that the Black Christian divorce rate, even for those who attend religious services 2 or more times per month, is still close to the national average. So we know that if there was more racial diversity in their Harvard study, that we would expect the divorce rate to be less than the 50% reduction that they reported. So why does the divorce rate even matter? Well, marriage is an institution created by God. He designed it, and therefore it's fair to expect that marriages that are patterned after his design should be happier and last more than others who are not following his ways. But God's people are still sinners, and because of that, divorce is a reality. But if there is no statistical difference between those who are walking in his ways and those who are ignoring him, it would be fair for the skeptic to say that Christianity doesn't make a difference for marriage, or following God's ways for marriage doesn't lead to better results. But they do. Some may wonder why going to church services would make a difference from those who just self-identify as Christians but don't go to services. Here's how the Harvard study answered this. They said, religious service attendance might affect marital stability because of religious teaching of marriage as sacred, teachings against divorce, a place to meet other couples and families, and programs, counseling and retreats that support marriage and family life. Their study also showed higher rates of remarriage after being widowed, as well for those who regularly attend religious services. Choosing to get remarried may be a strong indication that they had a happy marriage, as they want to re-enter that union again. So to summarize, the Barna study covered in the first video had a significantly smaller sample size of about 3,700 people, compared to Baylor and the Institute for Family Studies, which both had over 60,000, as well as the Harvard study, which had over 66,000. Barna also never accounted for church attendance, which meant that their numbers were skewed by nominal Christians being included with the devout in the results. This means Barna's conclusion is only true if one is Christian in name only. So their statement that Christians get divorced at the same rate as non-Christians only is accurate if one only cares about their nominal profession of faith, rather than any indication that they take their faith seriously. When the Barna study later in 2008 added 7 more faith affirmations to help isolate people who take their faith more seriously, the divorce rate went down by 21%. Also, when the Baylor study accounted for religious attendance, they saw the divorce rate went down too. The Institute for Family Studies found that for those who attend 2 or more religious services a month, there was a 25% reduction in divorces for white Christians and 15% combined for white and black. Finally, the peer-reviewed Harvard study found that frequent religious service attendance of more than once per week halved the divorce rate compared to those who never attend religious services. So it is not true that Christians get divorced at the same rate as non-Christians. The evidence shows that being a Christian who regularly attends church services lowers the divorce rate significantly. Speaking of marriage, if you're looking to prepare for or strengthen your marriage, the consensus best book from the Christian worldview is The Meaning of Marriage by Tim Keller and his wife Kathy. In it, they share a vision for what marriage looks like according to the Bible. I've got a link to the paperback as well as the Kindle version in the video description so you can start reading today. Thanks so much for watching.